Hi, Abre. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Vanessa?
I'm all right. So please tell the people who you are and what you do with the NAACP.
Yeah, I am a Bray. I oversee our Center for Environmental and Climate Justice at the NAACP. And so basically what that means is anything relating to how we're seeing it's getting a lot hotter at random times of the year, or more rain at different times of the year, or if you're seeing pollution in your communities or water contamination, those are the issues that we deal with in our center.
Amazing. And actually, you are somewhere right now, somewhere far, far away. Tell us where you are, what you're doing there.
Yeah. So I'm actually in Brazil right now, in Belém. There is a international conversation that happens every single year, where countries from across the world come together and they talk about how we're going to solve the climate crisis that we're in. And there are a number of actions that happen kind of outside of the formal negotiations, as well as formal negotiations for how countries can work together to solve the climate crisis. And so we're here, a part of amplifying the work that we're doing at the NAACP at this international conversation, because we know that the issues that we're dealing with in the United States are interconnected with what folks across the world are dealing with when it comes to pollution, water contamination, air quality issues, and the climate crisis more broadly.
Yes, I believe for those who may know this as COP, is this COP 2029, 28, 29?
30. 30.
30. Oh my goodness.
Can you believe it? It's 30 and we're still trying to figure out how to get not have as much of a dependence on fossil fuels. Like you would think
Yes.
it out by now, but
Yes. Yes. COP30 in Brazil. And I believe it's like a more remote area of Brazil. Is that correct?
it is. And shockingly enough, one of the things about COP that they are supposed to try to do is put it in places so that it's accessible for the people from frontline communities, people who are most impacted to be there. But what we've seen this year is that lobbyists from oil and gas companies outnumber the individuals who actually come from the communities
Wow.
who are impacted. Yeah, so much so that there has been a call to the leadership of COP to say that that can't be the case anymore. You can't have more oil and gas lobbyists at a conversation about the climate crisis than the people who are actually impacted in the countries too. So.
Yeah, what is that about? I was listening to the news yesterday and I also heard that this is the first time in a while that the US did not send anyone. I mean, COP stands for Conference of Parties, where it's a bunch of different countries coming in to talk about, how we can make the world a better place and reduce our emissions and all that. And the US didn't send anybody. But lucky for us, the NACP sent you. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is in line with what we've seen with the Trump presidency. We have an administration who vowed to make sure that we were going to ramp up our use of oil and gas, our fossil fuels, and is doing everything in his power to make sure that we don't have a future that we can be proud of. But it's important, to your point, for people to know that there's still people power on the ground amplifying the work that we're doing, amplifying the advocacy that needs to be done. We just participated yesterday in a global strategy conversation around data centers, for example, where we were seeing what these build outs look like in other places across the world. They were really excited to hear what we were working on here in the United States and at the NAACP. And so even though we don't have a formal delegation, it's incumbent upon us to
Yeah.
then continue to highlight, right? Like the work that is still happening in the US, regardless of the fact that we don't have a president who seems to, I mean, maybe he does understand the importance of this time and is, making sure that he is aligned with his interests of the fossil fuel companies who invested in his presidency. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the one hand, we have fossil fuels, and we know how that's bad for our environment, especially the Black communities, right? But then you mentioned data centers, which is something that a lot of people don't know a lot about their environmental impact. Can you talk to me a little bit more about, what these data centers are, why we're seeing more of them pop up in Black neighborhoods, and what the NACP is doing about it?
Yeah. Well, one thing that people may have seen in the past, so there have been, for example, these build outs where there might have been coal fire plants or these big infrastructures that were built in Black communities. And typically you would see lots of smog and smoke that would come out of these different types of infrastructure. Those things were technically supposed to be to ensure that we had energy production across the country. But what has happened is that it's also clear that the way that they produce this energy is in a way that leads to more air pollution, it's increased cancer rates in our community, it's decreased our life expectancy. It has an overall impact on also whether or not people want to actually live in those communities because they know the concerns of having this kind of big industrial build out in a community. And so for a number of years, we saw that built out in Black communities. And then now, AI, even though it's been here for a long time, is now more accessible to the everyday person. And so when you think about like ChatGPT, or if you go on Google and it automatically tries to give you an AI mode, all of those things don't actually live in the cloud. There has to be an actual physical infrastructure to power those requests that are made from people. And that infrastructure are the same buildings many times of those buildings that we saw in communities for a number of years that emit smoke and smog and air pollution, create water quality issues in Black communities. So now these data centers are meant to, over the next 5 years, the prediction is that it's going to outpace every other utility and an electric kind of output in the country because of the boom that's supposedly happening as it relates to data centers. Now, what does this mean for us as people who live in communities and we pay our utility bills? We have to pay like in order to access resources like water and things like that. Well, before they actually get to the community, there has to be a prediction that's done as to how much of the grid, the energy grid, it may take in order to power the data center. So, guess who has to pay for that restructure to happen? The people who already live in the community, not the data center. The turbines that may be used in order to power the data centers, they're running 24 hours a day. So that's continuous pollution that's going into the communities where these data centers are built. It also takes a lot of water, like hundreds of millions of gallons of water to cool these data centers. And you can't just put that water back into rotation with other safe drinking water. So now you also have in places, especially where you have water scarcity, they have even less water because of a data center that's coming into town. And so there's all these environmental concerns. And also the last thing I'd mention is the noise. They're really, really noisy. People have complained that it's hard to even sleep at night if they live near data centers. Yeah. And so all of these concerns are happening and they're popping up all across the country. And it's a real environmental and climate justice concern because they're going in the places where there was already existing pollution, which are typically Black communities and other frontline communities.
Wow, that's actually devastating when you talk about it like that, because you're absolutely right that AI is becoming more and more ingrained into like every facet of life, whether you want to or not. If you go on social media, they have these AI, searches now. When you Google things, ChatGPT is pretty big. People are using ChatGPT as a form of therapy even. And so I'm just kind of like thinking through like for every ask, how much water is being used, how much noise is being made, right? And the average person doesn't know or understand that this is not in the cloud. Like this is, in Bobby's neighborhood. And so we actually, the NAACP, filed a lawsuit. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So in Memphis, what we saw, there's a historic Black community, Boxtown, that's right in South Memphis. Now, this community, it's important to know the history because this is also the trends that we're seeing across the country. This community had an elevated rate of cancer. They had an elevated rate of air pollution. They had actually fought a pipeline coming near the community just a few years ago because there was a company that thought that they were going to be able to be a sacrifice zone for environmental pollution. Then Elon Musk actually came into that community. And instead of going through the normal process of filing to get a permit, seeing whether or not running these gas turbines, whether or not like he should go through that process, he just set up shop and started running unregulated methane gas turbines 24 hours a day in this historically Black community that was already facing all these environmental injustices. And so our branch has been involved, our state conference has been involved, alerting and highlighting, the concerns of this is a clear showing of environmental racism, right? And we worked with the local community groups that were there, and we filed a notice of intent to sue, which basically put XAI on notice to say, you can't just run unregulated gas turbines without following the procedures that have been put in place by the Clean Air Act. And so we said that it's a violation of the law that's been in place for many, many years that you just run that much pollution into a community without getting a permit. And so that's, one part of what we've done. They did end up filing for a permit because of the work that we've been doing on the ground with community members. And the permit that was issued to them by the county health department was for a minor source. So basically saying that they weren't polluting that much. They were only polluting a little bit, which if you're running potentially, in the 40s and 50s and 60s of unregulated gas turbines or gas turbines in general, that's not a minor source of pollution. So we are in the midst of also challenging that right now as well, saying to the health department that this is a major source of pollution. It's clear, and you need to protect the community there.
Okay, so we put them on notice, not quite a lawsuit, but we put them on notice, which forced them to then take sort of corrective action, even though it's not as much as they should do so. That's all thanks to the work of the local NAACP, the work that you're doing. It surely can't be easy because, even just explaining it, you see how it's one thing, but it's affecting so much of our life. Is there anything else that you want to share with us today when it comes to environmental justice and climate justice as a whole?
Yeah. Well, because we were seeing these data centers show up across the country, we were getting a number of calls, not just from our branches and our state conferences, but folks that we work with regularly in the space and folks that sometimes we actually don't really work with that regularly, who were really excited about the fact that there seemed to be some strategy regarding fighting back against these data centers. And we came together earlier this year with about 80 other coalition activists, organizers, and other organizations to build out what we call the frontline framework, which is guiding principles about what data center build out should look like in communities. And we did this because it was really important to show that there was an interconnected nature to what these harms look like. And I'll just quickly go through what they are, the high level bullet points, which is our health and our environment are sacred. Communities most affected must lead. Jobs cannot justify the harm. Accountability must be enforceable. We reject false solutions and fossil fuel dependency. Infrastructure must be community led. Interconnected harms require interconnected solutions. Solidarity builds power, and that we walk our talk. And we would love for people to just continue to share out these principles because it highlights, the collective work of a lot of different groups, including the NAACP leading that convening in order for us to get to that place.
Those are fantastic principles, and I think honestly, every movement could live by those. Thank you so much, Abre. Tell the people where they can find you, where they can find the work that you're doing.
Yeah, well, I'm on Instagram. It's just my name, Abre Conner. I'm on LinkedIn as well. But also you can follow the NAACP, and we highlight the work there and on our website about the work related to environmental and climate justice. So I'm really excited for us to be able to highlight some of this work, including later on today at a press conference that we're doing here at COP30 to amplify the work that is happening across the center.
Yes, thank you so much, Bray. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us. I know you have a very busy schedule there in Brazil attending COP, but this has been really good information. And as she mentioned, you can always go on nacp.org, visit our climate justice page, and you'll find out a lot more about the work that we're doing. Until next time, have a great day, Bray. I'll talk to the rest of y'all later.